thankful for the way these stories hold on to the lifetime we won't get back. I know these rivers carry on. People tend to stick to you after time. Places tend to do the same as we do. This river carries on and on.
Hello and welcome to Kankakee Podcast, where we talk about the people and places of Kankakee County. I'm Jake LaMore, and today it's kind of the first of a series that I've been wanting to do where we talk to residents or people that at least work in Kankakee County to hear immigrant story, to talk to immigrants, people who were originally born in a different country and they wound up in Kankakee County, which we wouldn't often think, like, how in the world did someone from across the globe wind up in a little place like Kankakee County? But it does happen, and there's quite a few of them here with really cool stories. And the first person we're talking to in this series happens to be someone who's a very dedicated listener of the podcast and also happens to be a patron supporter. And you won our survey drawing.
I did. Surprise.
As well. But let's give a big warm welcome to Simon Topliss. How are you, Simon?
I'm doing very well, Jake. Thank you for having me in this wonderful setting you have here.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad you like it, and grateful to have your support. You and I met, I don't know, a couple of years ago. Maybe it was more than a couple of years ago.
Brickstone.
It was Brickstone. Yeah. It was either that or I think you had been to Milner Media to do some networking.
Correct. Yeah, I came in to do some IT work for a couple of hours there. Yeah. So yeah. But then I met you at Brickstone. Mm-hmm.
I was having drinks with Elizabeth James.
Correct.
And then you were there as well. So I think that was the first time we actually had some type of conversation.
Yeah. I'm an old friend of Elizabeth's, and so it was kind of through her that I kind of got introduced to you face to face.
Yeah. And then and gosh, what was that? Was that sometime last year we saw each other again because I was in the process of liquidating my Weber Printing is my family's printing business, and so we were in the process of getting rid of printing equipment, and so I saw you then because you wanted to see one of the pieces.
I work for an IT company up in Tinley Park, and their background is printing, and my background is printing. I trained as a lithographic printer back in the day, so I was very interested in seeing what was on offer, and I persuaded my boss at the time to actually take one of those printers just for show, to put in a kind of a museum setting in the office, but unfortunately logistically it just that thing was a beast.
It's so funny, like when we were moving some of that equipment, when we were in the process of moving it out of our building in Mantino, we were surprised. Like we knew how heavy some of that stuff was. We're like, oh yeah, this is really heavy. But then it was like when it came time to move it, it's like, okay, this is even heavier than we thought.
Imagine. Right.
I mean, there was one point where someone had shown up with their skid steer to move one of those printing presses, and one or two guys had to stand on the back of that skid steer to keep the back wheels from the back of the wheels were going up on this skid steer because this piece of printing equipment was so darn heavy
Yeah,
because it's
I
just
believe
like
it.
iron or, it's just, that's what everything was made,
And then they're
made out
not
of.
built to move. Once they're there to stay.
Usually, yeah, right. But and as we all know, I mean, we're talking this equipment was probably from anywhere from like the 1920s to 1950s, and everything was made out of materials that would last forever.
Right.
And now it's like maybe a car you buy has like a little bit of it's got a little bit of metal in there, but it's like mostly like plastic. And
I've got a relatively new refrigerator in my kitchen that'll probably last about 2 years. And I've got one in my garage that'll outlive me. That was made in the 70s.
Right. Yeah. It's funny how that works out. But anyway, so it was great to connect with you again in that realm, even though it didn't work out.
Yeah.
I feel like it was kind of meant for us just to connect and talk a little bit and hear like how much you love the podcast, which means so much to have your support, but also to learn. I had no idea that you had a printing background or that you even
straight from art school into the printing industry. Essentially, I was kind of making storyboards for printed catalogs. And would make printed plates, would do all the typography, and then that would be turned into this like printed catalog that people would buy things from.
I wouldn't think they would. I didn't realize they did storyboards for catalogs.
Well, it was in those days, and we're talking.
Well, yeah, I know we're talking, but I didn't realize back then that they.
It was the photographs and all the text were glued onto a template essentially, and then put under the camera to make the printed plate. So it was all a very manual.
Oh, okay. So you're talking. So it would the camera would capture the image, so then you could put it on the plate.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. But well, let's start at the very beginning of Simon Topliss. So, where were you born?
I was born in the town of Harrogate, which is in the north of England, in North Yorkshire.
Okay.
Is
Yorkshire, is that what are they?
It's a county.
It's a county.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean, the UK is made up of several counties, Yorkshire being the largest. It covers the most area. And it's kind of, the way I say it is, but it's 250 miles north of London.
Oh, wow. That's
250 miles south of Scotland.
Okay.
So it's bang in the middle of the country.
I was going to say right in the middle there.
Yeah, and they've got the coast an hour east and an hour west.
Okay. Wow, so you probably didn't travel to London that often.
Not if I could help it. No.
Yeah. So what was the biggest city next to you then? Is Cambridge in Yorkshire?
No, that's just outside London.
Oh, okay.
It'll be York, the city of York, which is one of the only cities in the country that's completely walled. To keep out invaders, and that wall still exists. You can walk around it, and it's spread out now beyond the walls.
Yeah,
but those walls with the archways into the city, they still exist.
And York is where New York got its name from, right?
I have to assume so. Yeah.
I forget the whole story behind that, but I know it's something along those lines, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
someone correct me if I'm wrong.
It would make sense for the English that came over here to name places after where they were from.
So the wall around York, do you know when that was built?
Oh.
Like, was it like 1,000 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I should know, probably, having been there. But also, it's one of those things that when you live somewhere and you have this on your doorstep, I never once walked around the walls. It was a real tourist thing to do, and York itself is a massive tourist industry. But I never did it because I lived there, and I could always do it the next day if I wanted to, and just never did.
Well, that's like here living in Kankakee County. It's like there's people that have never been to like Camp Shawanassi or I'm trying to think of, or maybe even to the state park,
right?
Things like that. It's like they've lived here.
The first thing I did when I got here. Yeah.
It's because it's the tourist thing to do.
Absolutely.
So this town, what was the name of it again?
York.
Not York, but the town that you
Harrogate.
Yeah. So you grew up in Harrogate.
I was born there because it was the nearest place that had a hospital.
Okay.
I actually grew up in a town called Wetherby. A little market town about 10 miles outside of York. I lived there for for 3 years of my life, and then moved to an even smaller place where there was 60 people lived in this village called Bickerton, and I lived there until I was in my 20s.
So, what's your family's background?
My dad was in sales, ex Navy, but he got into electronic sales, and my mother was my mother. Essentially. But as we got older, she explored her artistic side and became a florist and did lots of flower arranging and teaching classes and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's where my artistic side comes from, and my IT side comes from my dad.
Okay. So is that what your dad did in the Navy then? Was he doing IT stuff?
Communications.
Okay.
Yeah. Not so much. I mean, there wasn't really that much IT back in the 50s. But,
I was going to say, so he was in the 50s. Did he get into like the Korean War at all? Or was it around that time?
No, he didn't make it to any kind of any battles of any description. No, it was,
and you didn't end up having to like travel all over the world.
No,
because you might not have been born yet.
No, he was out of the Navy by the time I came around. He was working in this sales industry at the time when I came around. So
did you just grow up like just being fascinated by what your dad did, and that's how you picked up on it? Or
no, probably quite the opposite, to be honest, because I went to art college. I pretty much did art throughout my school time, and then went into art college for 3 years and came out of there with my art degree. But it was my dad who got me the job straight from college, working for the company that he worked for that had their own printing department. Because I mean, back in those days, again, everything was kind of under one roof. So the electronics that they made and what he sold were sold from a catalog that we created internally.
Yeah.
So that was really the only time our professional lives passed was that 5-year period when I worked there.
So what was this like day-to-day life like growing up? In the countryside, nonetheless. I mean,
unremarkable. I mean, there was the village that I was from. It had no school, no church, no bar, no store. It was literally just these houses in the middle of a cornfield.
So did everyone grow their own food? How did you get food? Yeah. I mean, I know, I'm sure you traveled, but traveling isn't exactly easy in the countryside. I mean, did people because not everyone has cars. I mean,
no, they don't. And certainly back when I was small, my father had the luxury of having a company car, which was kind of unheard of in those days, and not every family had one. So we were kind of the main transportation to get people around.
People would be like, "Hey, can I borrow your dad's car? Yeah, can you give me a ride?"
Yeah. But also, you take into context that England's a very, very small place, and you can fit England into Lake Michigan, for example. So it's you don't have to go very far to find something. So the nearest town, Wetherby, was 3 miles away. So it took 10 minutes to get there by car.
Okay.
And that had grocery stores, and I have to be careful when I'm talking. I was going to say supermarket, so I try to Americanize what I say, and probably for this podcast I shouldn't do that. Just stick to my native language.
No, yeah. I mean, please. I think we get what you're saying,
right.
But so. And you could probably even walk there. I mean, 3 miles.
Yeah, and we did, particularly when I was, in my later teens. I went to school, went to high school in this town, Wetherby. So, and
is that where you went to a grade school too? How did school work when you were little?
Grade school, well, yeah, it is.
And I know it wasn't. Maybe it probably wasn't called grade school.
We didn't have grades. I mean, we had primary school. And then high school. So primary school is really 3 to 11, and that was another village called Topliss, which was 3 miles in the other direction, and that had the primary school. Because there's no kind of boundaries where you can and can't go to school. You can just go to the nearest one or go to the one that's furthest away. It's your choice. So between 3 and 11, I went to this one school and had one teacher the entire time.
And I mean, the class size must have been
12.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was small.
It was very small.
Because you're coming from, there's all these other little towns, and
there was lots of little villages all came to school at the same place because it's the only place I had a school. But it was still, even if you counted up all those people, there was probably less than 100 in the entire school between the ages of 3 and 11. So
that would be interesting to be. It kind of reminds me of hearing our elders here in Kankakee County talk about going to one-room schoolhouses where they would be sitting in class with people that are age 6 to age like 12 or 11.
Yep.
And so like they're
they're
kind of learning all these different things. So what was curriculum like then?
Maths, English, art, history, and again it was one teacher in one class.
So how would
teaching everything at the same time, really?
So she would literally teach the like someone who's at like age 10. She would teach the same thing to someone who's younger, or how did that?
You had the same teacher per year at school. So as you progressed through the years, you got a different teacher. But the classroom, I never strayed from the classroom I was in. I was in the same room for all those years. But the teachers weren't necessarily specialized in any one subject either. They taught everything.
Yeah.
Or didn't. Depending on your point of view. So.
And then, so was it called high school then from primary?
Straight from primary to high school at 11 to 16. And that was a completely different, that was an eye-opener because that was totally different from my primary school days. Different classrooms for different classes with different teachers throughout the years. So, But it seemed that I migrated into the history, English, art side. So that the things that seemed to be the mainstay of education in the primary school was what ended up being my focus in high school. I was terrible at science because we never did science at primary school.
Yeah, I would imagine that might kind of get, maybe not on the top of the list.
Not in the 70s, no.
Yeah. So then at that time in the 70s, was there a law saying you had to go through so many grades or graduate with a high school diploma? Or what did you graduate? Did you graduate with a high school diploma? I'm just very fascinated by how education worked at that time.
At that time, and it's different now, but there was no graduation. You basically, if you made it to the end, then you went on to the next stage. So you went getting through primary school at 11, go to high school. High school was, you were tested at the end of every year to see what your level of education was. And then by the time you got to 16, you would do what's called O-level exams. And you would need so many, so for each class that you took, and you could take, 10, 12 classes, you take this O-level for each class. And if you passed it, the more O-levels you got, the greater your chance to go to university. And if you didn't get the O-level, you failed. So you needed to get some level of O-level to graduate high school. But it was never really, it was on a class basis, essentially, or lesson by lesson basis. So you could leave school with an O-level in geography, and that means you graduated high school.
Okay. And so was there, in order to get certain jobs, did you have to have like that O-level certificate or some type of?
For sure. Obviously, the more O-levels you've got, then the in the eyes of the employer, the more educated you are. And I mean, school didn't end at the end of O-levels either. If you got enough, you could go stay at school for 2 more years and do A-levels, which is the advanced level, which is what I did. So the more O's and A's that you get, then the higher the chance of employment after school.
And then it's fascinating to hear that high school ends at age 16 instead of here it's 17, 18. Usually it's like a couple more years.
Well, if you take the advanced level, then it is 18. Okay. But if you could drop out of school at 16, do your O-levels and then go work. You didn't have to, you could get 10 O-levels and quit school. Not that you would probably do that because you definitely want to go to further education. But but it was a a choice.
Mm-hmm. So growing up, what are some memories that stick out in your mind?
Oh, delivering the local newspaper and knowing every person by name was always a fun time. It was really just the days where
Excuse me. Sorry.
No, it's a wrong pipe there.
Wrong pipe there. Yeah.
It was a time when you'd on a weekend you'd all wake up and have breakfast, and then your parents would kick you out of the house, and then they'd call you at 5 o'clock and say it was tea time.
So that's not really too different from the what time was like here. I mean, that was like the same thing. I've heard so many people that grew up in the 70s and 80s, even in the 90s, were like, yeah, we were kicked out of the house. We weren't really invited to come back until dinner time.
You weren't even welcome most of the time. Yeah, it was, don't come back until your knees are bleeding, basically. At a time when there was, maybe 4 or 5 of us of the same age, and we just played games in the road, in the street, and went off scrimping for apples, or just causing mayhem.
Well, when you say mayhem,
what specifics?
Yeah.
Oh goodness me. Well, it's in England. We have this thing called Bonfire Night, which is 5th of November, and we have firework displays. So we used to carry fireworks, stick them down our trousers and then let them off in people's letterboxes and
okay.
I think the worst thing where the police did get involved, and I was 9 maybe. They just resurfaced all the sidewalks, the pavements.
Okay.
And this particular stretch didn't set, which was great for the boys on bikes. We just rode up and down it when there was tar and asphalt everywhere, and
you loved making your mark in there.
Absolutely. And when the local police, whose name is Norman, I'll never forget it, because he was the one policeman that did the entire kind of community. He came over and inspected all our bikes, and we're all in line as 9-year-olds saying, "Oh, I know, it wasn't us, it wasn't us, it wasn't us." And these tires are just black, just absolutely covered. So. But it was forgiven very, very quickly, because we're kids. It's 79, 78, and it's what you do, and there was no harm done, really.
Yeah, it reminds me growing up seeing tire imprints in the concrete on sidewalks. I've definitely seen a lot of that out and about, and I remember seeing kids doing that here too. So.
Yeah, if there's some trouble to be made, you're going to make it, because again, particularly when there's going to be, there's no payback. You're not going to get into that much trouble, apart from your parents saying, giving you a slap on the back of the hand and saying, "Don't do it again." But it was fairly lenient back in those days. So
after high school for you, is that when college or university comes in?
Yeah, I chose to specialize in art. So I went to a college that did art, and I did that for 3 years. I did it for a year and then changed courses after that year and did tried something else. I think I did photography for the first year, decided it wasn't my thing, and went into graphic design for the other 2 years. And that was a fun time. That was because the art college was in Harrogate, so I went back to where I was born.
Oh, okay.
On my motorcycle at all temperatures and winds, and that was not a fun time.
What kind of motorcycle did you have?
A small little 125cc. I mean, that's all you're allowed to have at that age, at 17, 18. So that was a tough time.
Okay. Yeah, gosh, I would imagine. So you would be riding that even in like the snow?
Oh yeah. Yeah,
you're riding on a motorcycle.
Yeah, there was no buses to Harrogate. There's no direct way to get there other than under your own steam. And I was a late bloomer when it came to driving, so I didn't get my driver's license until I was in my 20s.
Your dad didn't teach you even with company car. He's not going to let his kid drive that.
But my mother had a Mini at the time, which I was allowed to practice in, and I could drive. I preferred motorcycles. I just preferred to ride. But unfortunately, when it came to taking my test for my motorbike. My bike blew up. The pistons shot out of the engine.
Oh my gosh!
And I failed. And so and then there's a deadline. You can only have a provisional license for so many years, and that ran out, and I failed my bike test, so I had to get into a car at that point, and I got that test fairly quickly. But.
Oh, okay, it probably took you a little while to save up for a car or whatever you had to do. Right?
Yeah, my first car was a powder blue Nissan Cherry, I think it was at the time, which when it rained, it just filled up with water. So that was it wasn't much better than the bike, to be honest. I was still getting wet.
So, were you an only child?
No, I have an older sister. She's 2 years older than me.
And is she still in the UK then, or is she over here?
No. She's in the UK. Kind of. She lives very close to my mother, who's still out there. She lives in Wetherby, still. My sister's desperate to leave the country. She's always wanted to go and live in Spain or somewhere in Europe. Never had the chance. So when I got to move to the US, she was extremely jealous, and haven't been back since. So
you have not been back since you've left.
I've visited. I've
okay.
Initially through the business, I was allowed to go back because the reason I moved over here was because I worked for a company in York who made software, and they opened an office in Chicago and said to me, "Do you fancy 3 years living in the States?" And I just my marriage had just broken up. So I figured now is a good a time as any to experience something new. So I came out here for 3 years initially, but part of that was I got to travel to and from the UK 4 or 5 times a year. But that's petered out. I've not been back to the UK for 5-6 years maybe now.
So when did that opportunity come into play? What year was it that you were able to live in Chicago for 3 years?
1999. Because I remember celebrating the 2000 in Chicago. Yeah, it was meant to be a short term, just put your toe in the water, see what it's like, and just experience it really. And the 3 years of the temporary visa came to an end, and they extended it for 3 more years. So that came to an end. They extended it for 3 more years.
So you got extended, what, 3 times?
Extended twice. I got the visa initially and then extended twice. And then by that point, they realized I wasn't going back. So they, the place I worked for, they sponsored a green card. So, and then once I got the green card, I left that company and went to work somewhere else.
Oh, thanks for the green card. See you later.
It wasn't meant to work out that way. It's just I'd been with that company for 16 years. And it was time to experience something else in the US. And I'd settled down a little bit by that point more. I lived in Chicago for 10 years in 3 or 4 different apartments. And the question that you started with, at the beginning of this, and the one I get all the time is, why did you end up in Kankakee County? Why are you here?
Yeah.
And generally, it's one of 2 things that I've found is you either come here for work or for a woman. And I came here for the latter. So I met a girl in Chicago, and which in itself was an odd one because I just got back from England from a business trip, and it was St. David's Day, which is the patron saint of Wales, and it's kind of their St. Patrick's Day. And a friend of mine who's Welsh was having a party in an Irish bar. In Chicago. Yeah. So it's almost like the beginnings of a joke where an Englishman walks into an Irish bar for a Welsh party in the middle of Chicago.
It does sound like a joke.
So that was a good time, and I met a girl there who lived in Bourbonnais, and so I started coming down here and seeing her, and then commuting back to the city, and in the end, ended up buying a place here with her and her son, and commuted back to Chicago for work for 4 years, which was a long trek, going up to University Park, get the train,
That's a long day, man.
Get the L. So, and that was really the reason why I stopped working at that place was just the commute it was 4-hour round trip on my day. So it was taking a toll. So, I got a job more locally and had a family and kind of settled down really. Not that stayed that way, but.
So what was when you came to Chicago for the first, was that the first time you ever had been in the United States?
Yes.
Okay. So what was your impression when you first got to
big, isn't it?
Chicago? I was going to say it'd be much bigger. I mean, are there any, obviously there's London, but I would imagine, I don't know, London has to be bigger than Chicago, right?
I believe it's with all its boroughs and the way it stretches out. It probably is. I can't guess how many people live in London, to be honest.
Because you probably obviously had experienced at least London or maybe any other city nearby.
Leeds was the biggest city in Yorkshire, which is big, but it's not tall. So that's
there's not the skyscrapers.
No, not at all. And that's what struck me the most flying into O'Hare was as the plane was getting lower, everything was getting nearer far quicker than I was expecting it to.
Yeah.
So yeah, the sheer size was just amazed me. And it was summer as well. So it was, the whole place was beautiful. Little was I to know, and was very unaware of what the winters were like. So, and I'm still not really. It still shocks me every winter.
Are the winters more brutal? Because I would imagine you had some pretty brutal winters where you were at.
No, not very. I mean, I remember it snowing once.
That's it. You didn't have snow that often.
Not that stuck around. I mean,
it's probably just a lot of rain then.
A lot of rain. We lived in what's known as the Vale of York, so there's hills on either side pretty much, and we're just in this valley. So a lot of the weather just missed us. The one snowfall we did get, there was several feet of snow. That was I think 78 maybe, but that was really the only time I remember snow of that volume until coming here, and it's every year. So
what was the biggest adjustment for you coming and living in Chicago or in the United States?
It's not that different. It's not that different. Speaking the language definitely helps. It made that transition much easier. The foods are pretty much the same. The name brands are the same. Let's put it that way. A lot of the food in England is you wouldn't want anyway.
You weren't a fan of the food.
There are definitely certain things that I miss, and there's actually an Irish store in Tinley Park that sells English food.
Oh, okay.
So I go up there now and again to get my creature comforts, my tea bags, and chocolate biscuits, and it's just things that remind me that I'm still English. But no, it really there wasn't much of an adjustment. It was very, very, very smooth. It wasn't difficult at all.
I would imagine as far as language, it would probably just be some slang differences, and
asking for a cheese and tomato sandwich in Subway was a feat, because nobody behind the counter knew what a tomato was, and I used to have to say to them, look down across all the vegetables you have in this tray, and what sounds the most like tomato to you?
Gosh, that's so funny. It's so simple.
Yeah, it is. And so it's
it's not. It doesn't sound that different from tomato.
No, it shouldn't be that hard. But to be fair, a lot of the people that worked in Subway, they probably weren't American anyway. So
in Chicago, I mean,
wasn't their first language.
Yeah, right. Gosh, that's funny.
But even now, it's things like that. Since living in Bourbonnais, I've had a couple of boys, two sons, and 11 and 7, and they constantly pick up on my language.
Uh-huh.
It's not this, Dad. It's that. It's not. You don't say it like this. You say it like that. It's herb, not herb. It's like, okay, boys, okay.
I get that all the time, and I'm not even English. The herb and herb.
Right
thing. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
People are like, no, it's herb.
Yeah, it's a silent H.
Right. I do that all the time. Like, no, it's not herb, it's herb. Come on, get it right, Jake. Now, do your kids, are they fascinated with your background, or do they just give you a hard time about,
Both.
about your language?
They definitely. My eldest, say he's 11 now. He's more curious now. I'm becoming more of this sideshow to his school friends. You know,
like my dad's English.
He'll call me up and say, "Hey, Dad, just say something." You know, and it's like, what do you want me to say? Yeah, perfect. Thanks. Bye.
That's all he had to say. What?
Yep. Yeah, it was just see, told you he was English. So there's definitely more of a fascination with him, and my youngest he's starting to adopt some of my Englishisms. So
which are what?
Well, just words, essentially words. He'll say things like coffee shop. You know, and particularly like song lyrics. He listens to a lot of English music, and so he mimics a lot of the English sounds, which is fine now at 7. I don't know if it'll still work for him when he's 17.
I mean, it might. You know, some people fall in love with the Beatles at age 7, and they're still, you know, Beatles fan when they're 60. I mean,
yeah. So we'll see if he sticks with the English language as he is doing right now. But I can't see it. It's one of those things I think you've got or you haven't got. I'm amazed that after 20 years in this country, I still haven't lost the accent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you feel like you've adopted like some?
Yeah, I say tomato now instead of tomato. Yeah. I learned my lesson. Yeah,
you probably learned that one quickly.
And to be honest, it was even this weekend just gone. My house is covered with Google Home, and I've got a very kind of wireless home. But my Google Home,
because you work in tech, so you're
it's a given. But my device doesn't understand me when I ask it things, so I have to speak to it in an American accent, and I do a terrible American accent.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I got to hear it now.
Oh, it's straight Valley Girl stuff. It's like all I can do is whatever, and so you can't go around saying that and only that. So, yeah. So I have to say things like garage. To
you can't say garage.
No, I can't. No, it's like I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Again, look down. It's close to something. It's very close to what it should be.
Yeah.
But it's never accepted. So.
But it's I guess it's far enough apart from, like you said, like tomato, and then garage. You know.
Yeah, I think
garage.
Google's algorithms need to be updated just for me.
Well,
I think.
Isn't there? I know you can choose all the different languages, right? Isn't there a United Kingdom version of English?
I think there is an option for it to learn your voice, but I'm a bit skeptical of. I work in tech, so I'm very skeptical of it and what it can do. You know, to take that information elsewhere. Yeah. So I don't give it full access to too many things, but and I can learn to say garage. You know, it's much easier.
I would imagine so.
Now, if it doesn't understand me the first time, you know, I'll say it different the second time.
So what's another question that you get posed all the time besides, you know, how did you end up in Kankakee County?
The biggest one is you know, how come your accent is still the same after 20 years? And then followed up by please don't lose it.
Yeah, right.
Like do your sons have an English accent? I get that a lot. And why would they? They're American. But not too much. The main one is what on earth are you doing in Bourbonnais? You know, like well, you know, a woman will do that to you. So,
and I think maybe it's. I mean, how many? You were how old when you in '99? When you came here, you were in your 20s or 30s, right?
30, low 30s, 32,
so, I mean,
33.
you spent, a good chunk of your life
almost
in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, 30 years out of my 50, pretty much have been in the UK.
I would think that plays a big role into why you haven't lost your accent.
Yes, but... conversely, my sister can spend a week in the US and speaks with an American accent.
I have that same. The first tour I ever went on with my band. We were on tour with another band, and they were from Massachusetts, New Hampshire region. And so they say things a little differently, and they've got a little, just like any other country,
Right.
certain regions of that country have a little bit different of an accent, right? And they have a little different of an accent too. I feel like they kind of make words a little longer. So I spent like a month with them on the road
cool.
in the summer. It was like 10 years ago. And when I came back, my girlfriend and I, we'd go to the drive-through, for instance, and I'd be saying things really weird. Like I picked up on their accent.
Yep.
It happens. I remember when I was a kid, I spent a week in South Carolina with my cousins, and I started talking a little drawl, a little Southern drawl there. So like, I guess it just, to each their person.
Yeah, it just hasn't stuck with me, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I guess it's definitely a conversation starter when I'm even sat at a restaurant. My girlfriend now, she has to order me my food, because if I say something, the waitress will then have a conversation about where I'm from, what am I doing, and my girlfriend gets really like, just leave him alone. It's not like Dance Monkey, it's say something cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's I've had the accent all my life. It's not going to go anywhere, I don't think.
I'm sure if it was the other way around. I remember there was a wonderful waitress that used to work at Yanni's in Mantino, and she was Australian.
Okay.
So she obviously had an Australian accent, and I can only imagine, I would think that she would get tipped well. I mean, she was friendly, but also like Americans were saps for Australian accents, English accents. It's just
and particularly in small town.
Yes,
small town USA. You don't pass through people like me. You don't come through very often. And particularly when they're here to stay, it's always just this fascination. It's gone away now.
As people get to know you,
yeah. So
you're officially blended into.
For the large part, I'm big into the music scene in Kankakee. So
that's right.
I know a lot of musicians and I hang out in a lot of bars. It sounds a bit seedy, but I go and see as many live bands as I possibly can. So.
Right. Well, I mean, your partner is a musician. So
yes, Lee Evan from Lee Evan the Lowdown.
Yeah. So what's your favorite part about Kankakee County then, since you've been living here?
Favorite part?
What are some things that you've absolutely loved living here compared to Chicago, or even compared to when you were living in the UK?
I can park my car anywhere. I can go to the grocery store and find a parking place, and it's not a problem. That's one of the biggest things really is the space. There's a lot more space down here, and I'm from the country, so it's just kind of like home to me anyway. Grew up around the cornfields, so just having them on the doorstep here is just a bonus. And I really like downtown Kankakee as well. It's a place that fascinates me a lot, and really the music festivals and well, anything related to music. I just enjoy being around. So, and you had that in Chicago. I mean, obviously, I know we had it in Chicago because I did it for 10 years. I ran my own.
Oh, that's right. You were a promoter, weren't you?
Yeah.
So where'd you book shows then?
Initially we did things like Subterranean, Underground Lounge, Elbow Room.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Elbow Room.
Yeah.
That was sad.
Yeah. It is sad when a place has to close down. Damn you, COVID.
Did that happen? That happened during COVID? I thought it happened before.
Maybe
COVID.
That happened before.
I don't know.
No. It was the last year or so, wasn't it?
I don't know. I thought Elbow Room closed before COVID. Either way, it was kind of obviously it was sad because Elbow Room had been around for so long and was a big part of the scene for a long time.
Yeah. We had shows there every week, and it got to the point where we opened our own venue.
Oh, you did?
It was called the Gojangle Music Lounge, and because the whole thing was born from this website that a friend of mine created called Gojangle.com, that allowed musicians to upload their own music and bio and kind of then just get that music to a wider audience.
That's cool.
So it was there's a Mexican restaurant on Clark Street, just down from Wrigley Field. It's a huge space. We rented that out. I'll say rented. He gave us the space for free, and he took the till.
Okay, he took a cut.
Yeah, well, he took all the money.
He
Basically.
took all of it.
Wow. Unless we were charging on the door. I mean, we did it. Okay. We did it out of love. Really, we did it out of the love of music.
But that's where your music venue space was eventually.
Yeah. And that was a good time. That was a fun time.
How long did that go on for?
Gojangle itself went on for 10 years. The venue for about 3.
Okay.
And in the end, it just we got burnt out. I mean, I was doing an open mic at a bar called Pint on Milwaukee Avenue on a Tuesday, and then we're doing shows Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and these were going until 2-3 in the morning, and then I was getting up and going to work for my regular job.
Your regular job, yeah. It's not like this was gonna pay for.
No. So we didn't. The only time we really made any money out of Gojangle was when we sold it to some angel investors.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. And as soon as they acquired it, they fired me from the board of directors. So, which I was somewhat relieved with, because it was. I was 10 years older than when I started it, and it really was taking its toll. But I met Lee through that.
I was going to say that's how you met. Yeah,
and that in itself was a strange one, because we both lived in Chicago. We didn't know each other except through music. Her and her band ended up becoming our house band at the open mic at Pint, and then we kind of went our separate ways. I moved down here, and then I found her down here. She's from Hershire, or Limestone, kind of around there.
Yeah.
And she'd moved back home, and we were friends for such a long time that we were on MySpace, but we never migrated to Facebook.
Okay,
put it that way. So
yeah. So that happened with a lot of us, I feel like.
So we met up again and reignited her musical career. She formed a band. She'd already had this band, but in the city, and she reformed it with some musicians from Kankakee County. And now they practice in my basement.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah. What were some of did you ever, when you were doing Gojangle, is that Gojangle? Yeah. When you were doing that, were there any bands that you ended up working with that are now well-known?
No, I mean, there's a band called the Wombats out of the UK.
Okay,
they were on the site very, very early on.
Okay.
The nearest thing, and I was thinking about this just the other day, because I figured you'd ask me something like this, and I can't remember the guy's name, but there's a Lupe Fiasco song called America, and the backing vocals on that are sung by the guy that used to play for us, like on a monthly basis.
Oh, wow.
To come and do shows for us.
That's so cool.
To the point where he had to stop doing shows for us because we weren't paying any money, and he was becoming a little bit more professional and more serious in his career. If there are any successful bands that were on our side, then I don't know about them, and they probably don't want to call me up and tell me. But
I definitely I reckon I know the Wombats. I've heard that. Are they still around?
Yeah,
they are. Okay,
yeah, they are. Yeah, that's one of the very early adopters. Because it was say an open forum. People just upload the music from all over the world. We had bands from Russia, and in fact, we used to do shows. We had a show in New York, and we had a show in London.
Oh wow!
That people did on our behalf under the Gojangle name.
Sure.
Which was very cool. Just to see our name, hanging above a stage in a bar in London.
Yeah. Your hometown, your home country.
Home country, yeah.
Yeah.
And so, we had that whole experience was a lot of joy, a lot of good times, a lot of drunken memories.
Oh man,
and,
yeah. That's usually how it goes.
Again, one of the reasons why I probably had, gave it up and stayed down here was just for the quieter, simpler life. And then, met up with Lee, and now I'm back in it again, back in the music scene, and loving every second of it. But in the comfort of my own house, which is I don't know how far to fall.
You don't have to go to X venue and set set things up, and
Yep.
No,
but, it's a permanent state in my basement is the speakers and the drums and the mics. So yeah,
that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I mean, this has been a lot of fun. Anything else you want to add?
I just on the history side of things, it's there's a war memorial on Broadway. And my name's on there. My surname is on there. So I'm not the first Topliss to be in Kankakee County.
Oh, I wonder, do you think there's a connection, or do you think it just happens to be, I don't know, how Topliss? I mean, how
it's
is
not
that
a common name?
It's not a common name.
No. I mean, there's got to be something there, I would imagine. And I've always been fascinated to find out who that person was and where they came from. So if anybody knows, because I haven't found anything. It's a slightly different spelling. It's only one S, but it's I mean, it all comes from the same pool, I imagine.
I would imagine so, because I know, just from speaking from like my family's background, LaMore has a couple different spellings, and apparently we're still all actually related somehow. Just some preferred to spell it a different way, or like in my case, my family has a capital M, and then there's other LaMores that don't have a capital M. And then there's another group that, instead of pronouncing it LaMore, it's pronounced Lamar, and it's got a little bit different spelling. So
you've got to think that at the time when the immigrants first came over to the US, they couldn't write.
Yes.
So whoever was transcribing their name were doing it by ear and just writing down whatever they thought.
Well, and that's another reason I always say that's why there's so many Andersons. That's why there's so many Smiths, is because they ended up being assigned to that name.
Yes. Yeah, because it was just easier.
Yeah. So you've got all these Andersons and all these Smiths that have no relation to each other.
Yep.
And it's kind of sad, because it's like, okay, well,
that history's gone.
Yeah. How do I trace my heritage? Yeah. Like, I don't know where,
Yeah, that is sad. That part of history has just been wiped out purely because of the time. It's just they couldn't write it down, or they couldn't verbalize it, or
Yeah.
So I'm curious to find out who that Topliss is.
I would be maybe that's something we can work on together. Maybe we can find out something on that. But that would be interesting, because do you know if you have any other family that has come here to the United States besides yourself?
I have family in Canada.
Okay.
But I'm the only US one that I'm aware of.
Okay. But you at least have other family on this continent.
Yeah, I've not seen them for 30 years.
Sure.
But there is family here.
Are both of your parents English as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're pure English
as far as pure as you could possibly. Yeah. I mean, we all the English, they come from somewhere.
Well,
Romanic or England's been invaded more times than any other country, I think, by various different people. Who knows?
Probably.
Even our royalty isn't English. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You got a good point there.
Germans.
Yeah. Those darn Germans. All right. Well, thank you, Simon Topliss, for being on the show and letting us learn all about your heritage and where you come from. And I'm so glad you winded up in Kankakee County.
Yeah, me too. Thank you. I appreciate the time. And I'd like to do it again sometime.
Kankakee Podcast is a LaMore Media LLC production, hosted by Jake LaMore and edited by me, his intern, Nathan Burns. Thank you so much for listening. Please share this podcast with a family, friend, or neighbor that you think might enjoy learning new things about the people and places of Kankakee County. Also, a special thank you to our patrons for helping make this episode possible, including Jake Lee, Jesse Arsenal, Dave Barron, Daryl Damper, Samantha Rochnowski, Lake Iverson, Travis Garcia, Jane Bostwick, Dawn Harrison, Simon Topliss, Scott Wright, Carrie O'Connell, Jamie Race, Eric Olson, Dan DeBoard, Jeff and Rosa Carroll, Teague Drennan, Sandy and Steve Twett, and Rose Lucky. To become a podcast patron, go to KankakeePodcast.com and click on the Patron tab. If you pledge $5 or more per month, you'll also hear your name announced on an episode. There's also other rewards like early access to episodes, behind-the-scenes podcast episodes, podcast merch, discounts on special events, spending a day at the Kankakee County Museum with Jake, and so much more. Your monthly pledge is truly appreciated. Our goal right now is to reach $400 per month, so please sign up for the Patron program today at KankakeePodcast.com. Our theme song is by Lupe Carroll.